Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with Derek Simonds of Numa. Ted, this is going to be one of the hot topics at NADA this year.
Sarah, you're so right. And you know very well that the phones are the hot topic at the Fixed Ops Roundtable. And there's no company more integral to that than what Derek Simonds at Numa is doing right now. Derek, welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thanks, Ted, and thanks, Sarah. It's always a pleasure to be here with my friends on the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Derek, there's been a lot going on, and we have a lot of new listeners that are tuning in to the Fixed Ops Roundtable, and a lot of existing listeners too. Tell us a little bit about Numa and what sets you apart in fixed operations.
So Numa is really unique. Numa is the only platform that is AI powered in automotive that's employing the concept of AI agents. And the AI agent concept is pretty interesting because what that allows us to do, if you think about Numa, Numa is our parent AI. And then depending on what the fixed ops department needs, Numa's able to call up an AI agent. Think of it like as an individual that's working in your staff, in your dealership for you, that actually can provide the same kind of responsiveness that a human can in most instances. So we have AI appointment scheduling agents. We have AI status update agents. We have AI parts counter agents. And so we've built out this really cool framework that allows us to address the needs of what dealers have. So we have an opportunity agent. So a dealership might say to us, hey, look, we need to really focus on acquiring used cars out of the service drive. We're like, no problem. We have an opportunity agent for that. And we have an AI that can actually engage customers that come in for a repair and then can discuss with them the potential of us purchasing the car or upgrading them to a newer vehicle of their choice, right? And then we have a declined service AI agent that's able to look at the repair order from a declined service a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 6 months ago, and communicate with that customer and engage them in regards to getting them back in to get that declined service taken care of. And so there's a lot of cool things that we do with these different agents, and it's really based upon what the dealership needs. So we try and build a customized solution for each dealership that is going to help them achieve their goals. One of the critical things about Numa, I say this all the time. Like when I'm talking to our internal team, I can say, we've got the best software in the world, but if we implement it in the wrong way at the dealership, we will fail. So our number one most critical, absolutely has to happen thing is for us to understand what the dealer's needs are before we even begin the implementation process. If we haven't established what the dealer's goals are for implementing AI, then we've already failed. And so based on that, we're actually able to build out a custom solution that's tailored to what the dealership needs to achieve the goals that they want. Are they focused on customer satisfaction? No problem. We know how to do that. Are they focused on more dollars per RO? No problem. We know how to do that. Are they wanting to use the opportunity agent to acquire cars out of the service drive? No problem. We know how to do that. So we're able to take that and say, okay, these are tangible goals that you have that we can translate into actions that these AI agents need to take, and we can set the AI on the path to achieve those goals for the dealers.
Derek, one thing I've noticed is that you ask a lot of the right questions and you take the time to listen to dealers. Tell us more. What sets Numa apart when it comes to supporting fixed ops teams? You've told us some of that already.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to the fact that the way that Numa was built, right? And for people that have heard me talk about this before, I apologize, but Numa wasn't built specifically for automotive. Numa was actually built by a team of Silicon Valley tech geniuses that was designed to be able to function in hundreds of thousands of businesses worldwide, not just automotive. And so what that means is the ultimate customization of Numa and the way that we're able to manage what Numa does is so much more flexible than if somebody had this idea is like, oh, I want to build an AI agent that's going to answer phone calls and schedule appointments. When you have that vision, right, you're able to execute on one thing. But what Numa does is it allows us to have flexibility to handle anything that's going on in the service department. And Ted, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but 41% of all the calls that ring to a service advisor as of today are actually customers that are calling for a status update. We all know we failed them at that moment in time, right? If they have to call us for a status update, we've already failed them. And so we have the ability to create these agents that actually preempt that through preemptive status updating and being able to engage that customer on the phone when they call. Because Numa, the unique thing about Numa is that with our integration, which is deep into all of the major players in the DMS space, we're able to know where a customer is in the life cycle. And so the AI is going to act intelligently based upon where that customer is. And so if there's an appointment scheduled, we're going to acknowledge that and be like, hey, Ted, are you calling about the appointment that you have scheduled in 2 weeks? Or if your car's in for service, we say, hey, Ted, I see your vehicle's in for service. Are you calling about a status update, right? And so the AI actually responds differently based upon where the customer is in the life cycle, and that changes the game. Because once you have an AI that's engaging the customer where they want to be engaged, right? They don't want to have something that puts them into a loop and is asking them a bunch of questions. They literally need a response based upon where they are in the life cycle of their ownership. And that's what we're able to provide. So that's a couple of the things that I think are really important. And then I think big picture, I talked about the fact that our origins weren't automotive, but for the last
Someone is at the garage.
Sorry about that. The Alexa decided that somebody needed to let me know they were at the garage. Our origins being non-automotive have put us in a great position that we have ultimate flexibility. But what's happened is in the last 3.5 years, we've answered over 22 million phone calls for dealerships. Wow. 22 million phone calls. Think about that, because now that information, that data, those conversations are what feeds our automotive AI, being Numa, and it's put it in a position where it understands automotive communication very, very well. And so that's what allows our parent AI, Numa, to be very specific when it comes to stuff that's happening with the individual opportunity agents, because we speak automotive.
Derek, a follow-up, if I may, because a lot of our listeners, AI has been a huge conversation at the Fixed Ops Roundtable. We've had a lot of discussion around it. But as you mentioned, not all AI is created equal. There's some that maybe put them into that loop, as you described, where it's just regurgitating responses and it has a very precise response to a certain question. Numa has generative AI, if I understand it right. So what is the difference between AI and generative AI?
So if you look, there's actually there's 3 levels of AI, right? The first level of AI is basically, hi, I'm a computer that's pretty smart and pretty quick, and I understand text and I can transcribe that. And then I have a set amount of responses that I can give. So basically we call this a decision tree. You say this, and if I understand this, then I will respond with this. That's like limited AI that we see a lot of usage in automotive. The second set is when you get into generative AI, which is what we've been working with for the last couple of years. Generative AI is a la ChatGPT, right? So ChatGPT is probably the most famous generative AI player in the market. But generative AI is a much more complicated algorithm that's based upon the AI's understanding of the sum total of the knowledge that it's consumed, which for ChatGPT was up until like November of 2024 is what it's learned. So it knows all the stuff that's out there on the internet, and it's able to respond using that. And so generative AI is a more human-like interaction. And so one of the challenges, though, with generative AI, and Ted and I talked about this, I don't know if it was the last time or the time before last. One of the challenges about generative AI is that if you just throw generative AI into an application and it does not have the automotive foundation, like what we have with Numa with those 22 million calls, what ends up happening is that the AI and the customer can get outside of the scope of what an automotive conversation could be like. And that's when you end up with a situation like where the guy convinced the AI to sell him the car for $1, right? And so you have to build protections into the system, because generative AI is going to look at it and say, what's the best way to answer this question, right? And so what we do is really important. We understand fundamentally what an automotive conversation should be like, whether it's a text, a web chat, or a phone call. And if the conversation gets outside of 90% of scope for that general automotive path, then we're actually going to tag a human in. So if somebody starts asking our AI, hey, where should I go for lunch? We're going to be like, yeah, no, that's not an automotive question, right? There's something that you're trying to do that I don't want to participate in. And so we're going to tag a human into that conversation. Because again, generative AI is amazing, but generative AI with no restraints and no direction is actually super dangerous. And so we want to moderate, modulate, monitor what that generative AI is actually providing back to the customers. And as long as we can keep it inside that 90% scope, then we're going to use it. And so the next level, which Sam Altman from OpenAI has been talking about, is called artificial general intelligence. And that's truly going to be indistinguishable from humans once we get to that. And he's already teasing that we're going to see something, probably next quarter in regards to that. That's actually a little scary to me. That's the part where I start to get a little bit like, oh no, now we're starting to get Terminator-ish. But we currently, with the generative AI and the way that it's growing as fast as it's growing right now, there's so much more power in generative AI today than there was even 2 years ago. And so we're able to do things right now that we've never been able to do before. In fact, we were talking about the opportunity agent. One of the agents that I talked about, we're releasing a new version of it at NADA, which is in a day or two. So I'm hoping people stop by the booth, 7012. But we are releasing a new version of our opportunity agent that helps dealers schedule appointments when their people aren't available. And the way the new opportunity agent works for this AI scheduling is that when it's talking to the customer, it actually is able to make a decision. Is this customer a customer that would rather text with us? Is this customer somebody that would rather ultimately speak to a human? Or is this a customer that I can actually complete the appointment and schedule it in X time or my Karma or Techion without any human interaction? And so as the conversation progresses, the AI actually makes the decision what path to take. And we have found that that has increased our ability to schedule appointments exponentially, because what we found, and the OEMs were preaching this for a long time, but they've always said communicate with the customer where they want to be communicated with. Meaning, if they want to email, email. If they want to text, text. If they want to talk on the phone, talk on the phone. Right? Well, that's what we found. The AI is able to communicate better with a customer where they want to be communicated with. And I'll tell you what's interesting about the texting is that the people that text with the AI are the ones that have the highest level of satisfaction. You know why? They didn't want to talk to anybody anyway. They just didn't want to talk to people. They'd rather text. So when the AI is texting with them, they're like, yep, 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 yep. And then they book their appointment and they're done. And we see this, like over 66% of the text engagements that we have with the AI result in a scheduled appointment. And it's just, there's no fallout. Even the customers that don't schedule are very receptive when somebody from the dealership reaches out and it's like, hey, were you able to schedule that appointment? We see that it wasn't in the system. And they're like, no, I needed help because I needed to add in a transmission service and I didn't know how to do that. Right. So what we're seeing is that the customer is very engaged when they get met where they want to be. And so and I'm not just shamelessly plugging this, but you can hit numa.com or you can come by the booth and we can show you how this works. But it's really cool to see the AI meeting the customer where they want to be met. That's pretty interesting.
Derek, fascinating stuff. You and I have talked a little bit about this before. How does Numa solve some of the most pressing challenges in fixed operations? You've told us about some of them, but obviously there are so many, and the phones are so critical to what we do at the dealership.
Yeah. I want you to think about this for a second, Ted. If you think about every call that rings into the dealership, right? There's a crazy amount of customers that call in and hang up because they've already left a voicemail and they still haven't heard back. What we have found is that when we first start working with the dealership, it's not uncommon for a customer with their car in the shop to call 3, 4, 5 times before they actually speak to somebody. Now, every one of those calls requires going through the switchboard, requires a line being tied up, it requires a human to answer when the call rings back on hold, right? All of these calls are really taking time out of the day of not just the person they're trying to reach, but the whole entire dealership operation. And so when we drive down the amount of times that a customer calls versus the number of ROs there are, what we find is that the dealership operations improve across the board. And so our goal is to get every single dealership that we work with to 1.5 calls per customer. So to get them from 4 calls per customer down to 1.5 calls per customer, because we know customers are going to call multiple times. That's just going to happen. But when we see a dealership get to that 1.5 calls per customer, what we start to see is magic. We start to see customer satisfaction going through the roof. Because what does that tell us? It tells us that we are actually taking care of the customer. They call one time, we respond. That's amazing. Anybody that's below 1.5 calls per customer is doing a fantastic job with communication. And communication is the number one indicator of customer satisfaction and customer retention, period. And so when you look at the initiatives that the OEMs have today, almost every single OEM has a retention initiative tied to their fixed operations programs. And so when you see that, you realize we have to start doing things differently. And so the two things that we believe that we really help for retention is, number one, we're scheduling appointments for things that fall through the cracks, because our AI answers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It answers every single call. It gives every single customer the same opportunity to schedule an appointment. How many times have you listened to a recording of an advisor talking to a customer and they never asked for the appointment, right? And how many times have we heard stories about calling a customer back and they'd already gone somewhere else because it'd been 3 hours, right? We live in a microwave popcorn generation, man. If somebody calls and you don't respond in 15 minutes, they're not waiting for you because they've got brand equity with the bow tie and they want to deal with their local Chevy dealership. No, they won't service. They're used to clicking a button and having it delivered from Amazon Prime tomorrow, right? They're not waiting. So if they need a brake job or an oil change, they're going to Jiffy Lube, man. They're going to Pep Boys, and they lose those customers. And that's silent defection, and that's horrible. And so we really, truly believe that one of the reasons that we're doing so good with service retention is that we retain those customers because we don't miss those appointments. If a customer calls and needs an oil change, we're going to get it scheduled. If a customer calls and needs a brake job, we're going to get it scheduled. It's going to happen. The AI is going to ask for that appointment every single time. It's not going to falter. And if it does get screwed up, this is the one big thing about Numa that I cannot overemphasize. We are completely, totally transparent. Every single call, whether it's an AI, a human, any kind of interaction, is transcribed and recorded, and it's there for the dealership employees to see. So if the AI is unable to schedule an appointment with a customer, Ted, Sarah, we're going to actually push it back to the dealership and go, hey, we didn't get it. We need your help. And we're going to actually flag it, and they're going to have a complete recording of everything that happened. That way they can call the customer back and go, hey, by the way, I see that you were speaking to our scheduling agent about getting a brake job and they were unable to get you scheduled. What can I do to help get that done? And they're able to start where the customer left off, and they're not having to ask a whole bunch of questions. They're not having to do anything. They already know all the details, and they're able to get in and get this thing done. So there's a lot of stuff that's tied into that. The next piece is really about how do we track and manage what's happening with status updates. I harp on status updates because I think that status updates are one of the greatest ills that we have in automotive right now. If we're not updating a customer on their car, they're going to be very upset. I talked to a dealer the other day, and he goes, man, I took my boat in earlier this year to get a service, and nobody called me for a month. And I was like, well, think about how that feels if it's your car and you're depending on that for transportation to work or to get your kids to a ball game or to take them to school, and think how that feels at 12 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours if you haven't heard from your service advisor and you're the person on the other end. So that's the problem that we have, right? And so when we look at what's happening in the service department and we start stack ranking service advisors based upon how many of their calls coming in on a weekly basis are status updates, it changes the game, right? That, I always say this, cliches are cliches because there's truth to them, right? And how many times have we heard stuff along the lines of, if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter, right? So we're talking about status updates and we're telling advisors, I don't want people calling for a status update, but are we measuring it? And so Numa shines the light on that and is actually tracking that and is reporting back on that for the fixed operations managers. And so they're able to see, Bobby does a great job. He had 1 status update call this week. Billy didn't do a good job. Billy had 10 update calls this week, right? And there's something that we need to do about that. And we can address it because it's actionable, it's defined, it's measurable, right? It's information that we can act on. And so that's kind of cool. And that puts us in a unique position. Those are just some of the things that I think are really kind of unique to what we're doing and, how we're providing value back to the dealers. I cannot tell you the last 30 days, I could read a bunch of these, but we are getting so many testimonials from dealerships right now about having record months in the service drive and having more appointments than they've ever had before. And it's because of the way that we're able to take these appointment opportunities and not let them slip through the crack. So a lot of good stuff that's coming out. So I said, I want to bring this up real quick. I said, stop by the booth or reach out to us or whatever. We'd love to show you how this new integrated appointment agent is working because it's a game changer. It truly is. The second thing that we're doing, We are launching, and thank goodness that this is right at NADA, because this is going to be kind of interesting as far as disrupting the industry.
Okay.
We're fully baked into the phone system already, right? That's part of what we are. We're baked into the phone system because of the way that our AI integrates with it. So we have taken the next step, and we are announcing call intelligence for service advisors at NADA. And what that means is any calls that ring in or out of Numa are fully recorded, they're fully transcribed. There's a sentiment analysis, a call coaching, and a summary done on every single call. And so if we have a call where the advisor's calling out to upsell, we're going to do a sentiment analysis, we're going to do a summary, then we're going to offer coaching cues to that advisor on what he could have said when the customer said, well, I don't think I really need to do my breaks right now. And so we're going to give him possible ways to overcome that objection. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening with this. The big thing that we're hearing from dealers is that they absolutely want this because it's recording and transcribing every single call that comes through the system, right? And they're telling us that they want it, but they've never done it before because it was too costly, right? And so we're bringing it out. If you're a Numa customer, we're going to do call intelligence, call summary, call recording, transcription, and call coaching. We're going to do it for $100 an advisor per month.
Wow.
So a ridiculously inexpensive way to begin to take it to the next level for your team. And this is this is the cool thing about working for Silicon Valley, is that disruption is part of their core. And so they're like, well, we can do this. We're already using the minutes. We're already engaged with the dealer. Let's figure out how to do this at the most cost-effective way that we possibly can. And we are, and it's powerful. We've had dealers piloting it for several months now, and the results are just amazing. And what's interesting, and I go back to what I said before, if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter. When you start looking at it and the advisors realize that, yeah, it's listening to me, yeah, it's grading me, but it's also giving me actionable ideas that I could implement tomorrow on my next call, or today on my next call, that's going to help me make more money, they're pretty okay with that. So it's really kind of a cool thing to see this happening in real time. And we're super excited about that. So call intelligence and the new integrated agent that allows customer to handle the appointment scheduling any way that they want is all live, and can't wait to show people. It's super cool.
Well, everybody, Derek Simonds here with Numa today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable. If you want more information, you can visit. What is the booth number again, Derek?
7012. You can't miss us. 7012. When you come in the front door on the right side of the expo hall, we are right there. We're in the front row, right by the front door. So super excited. And hope to see both of you out there at NADA.
And if you're not going to be in New Orleans, you can also visit Numa.com. Ted, I know we're going to have a lot more conversations around AI and all of the wonderful things that it can really do for service advisors and service departments.
Derek, exciting times, and thank you for leading the way at Numa. And look forward to hearing great things this year from Numa, dealers, fixed ops dealers, our dealers, your dealers. And just taking the next level. So congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Everybody, Derek Simonds from Numa. Visit them at Numa.com at NADA later this week in New Orleans, booth 7012. Derek Simonds from Numa here today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.